Welcome back to In Light of the Gospel. This is episode 76, and this is the third time interviewing John Fehr. The first time he had just become free from meth addiction. He was on the verge of losing his family and losing his life in a very real sense. He went off to a rehab center in BC called the Joshua House and was drastically, radically transformed and saved by the gospel of Christ. Since then, he's been on a mission to try to help other people get free from drug abuse, sex abuse, or alcoholism, and he's got a real desire to see people liberated and freed through the power of the gospel. He's now started a ministry called Born Again Ministries, and he's really has a lofty vision and a goal of purchasing a property way up north as a rehab center, a place to help other people who, like him, have given themselves over to addiction and to vices of one sort or another, and to help them get away from their routine and their habits and their addictions, their temptations, and to have the opportunity to understand and know the gospel through Christ. So I really hope you guys get a lot out of this, but also maybe catch a vision, a part of his vision, and there's a way for him to get this ministry started and help some of these people who are severely hooked and addicted, that they can also find a way to get free. So appreciate you listening and sharing these videos. I hope that this goes to the right places, to the right people, and the ministry gets what it needs to get off the ground. God bless you. Two different mindsets there, right? One mindset, I think they need to be balanced. One mindset is, let's go into all the world, every culture, every tribe, every nation. Let's learn the languages and get into these different, little places. They all need to hear the gospel. Yep. But some churches have done that, and then their own children hate God and want nothing to do with Christianity, and their businesses are corrupt, and it's like, what?
what's the sense, right?
What did you do? You won a few souls across the world, but you lost your family and your children. So these people are much more focused on, let's establish something right here that could last multi-generations.
Well, and then the thing is too, with that, you establish further, right? It's a sense an investment where you can really make a phenomenal difference right at home.
Yep.
Where you can see the progress, where you can let it grow, and you can kind of guide it along its way.
Yeah.
I think too, in the same way that as much need as there is everywhere, like you can walk to your neighbor and you can find something to do, that'll benefit him, right?
Yeah.
And or even just in your local community, right? There's tons of work right around where we are.
Yeah. I've always been of the mindset that the whole world needs to hear, right? Every tribe, every nation, every kindred, every tongue, and I think that's still very much the truth. But if you focus on out there constantly, then the inside kind of falls apart, and then there's nobody left to go in the future generations, right? So you're so focused on reach every tribe now. That way, maybe this is the last generation. Maybe Christ comes now, and we don't have to worry about it anymore.
Maybe,
but that shouldn't be our focus. We should be thinking, how do I raise up solid, godly children that are can face the world. And then maybe God chooses some of them to say, hey, I want you to go into another country. But your focus isn't so much, let's send everybody out. Focus is, let's raise up solid people, and then God will direct them, and he'll open doors.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I'm already recording. We can just kind of jump right into the conversation at any time.
Sounds good.
I just thought it'd be a good way to start.
Yeah, really good way to start.
First of all, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
Yeah?
Yeah, really good.
How long has it been since you've been completely free from...
Well, it's April 2nd, 2021, and so I've been saying 3.5 years for the last 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And so,
but in April, it'll be 4 years clean.
4 years clean, yeah. Yeah, 100%.
You're thinking of going back, maybe, or no?
No. Actually, I was just having a conversation on the way here, and it's not that it has left my mind completely.
Okay.
Like I would say, especially with this new venture that I'm, feel I'm called to, it's been on my mind a lot lately. The addiction of it, replaying memories, all that kind of stuff. It's very much there, but it's a completely different thing now. Where it used to be a plague, and now it's just like it brings me to the recognition of God's grace and where I'm at, right?
So there's feelings like almost a temptation to have some of that, the results of taking things?
No, not so much the temptation of it, but the remembrance of it.
Okay.
the remembrance of it, right? There's like I guess you could say in a sense you're never free from the, even though you're free from the addiction, you're never free from the memory, right?
Yeah.
As well as your mind will serve you, that's as well as you'll remember.
Well,
right?
I can say even in regards to things like lust and pornography, I've been walking free from it for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
But the drive for it, the temptation towards it, the little subtle hints and suggestions towards temptation and lust are just as strong as ever sometimes.
Absolutely.
And that's more motivation for me to say, no, I don't want to go that way.
Yeah, because there's a promise and an ease to maintaining, as opposed to the original struggle, right? The original being at a place of despair and not having any hope for a future, really.
And you can't find
right?
victory over it.
And compared to now, it's like absolutely not. Right, that's the first thought would be like absolutely not.
Yeah.
There's just, it could not ever happen again, right? Because of because the memory's so clear, right? And the despair was very real.
Yeah.
And that's also why it's become such a big focus for me.
Right.
It seems like as much as I have things to do here, a part of me still would love to be in rehab. A part of me would still love to,
so that you could have that constant focus on
socialize and help and be helped as well, right? Because even oftentimes in helping someone else, you're the one that gets the help, right? Oftentimes,
yeah.
right?
Oh, for sure. I saw a quote the other day, and I won't be able to quote it exactly, but it said the teacher learns way more than he teaches the student.
Absolutely.
The speaker, whoever's engaging in presenting a sermon or a teaching, has learned way more than he can present to the audience.
Mm-hmm.
An author learns way more than the person who's reading what he writes, right?
And it's often the frustration, the fact that you cannot bring it across the same way that it's been
But the
formulated
encouragement
in your
with
mind.
that was, go be a doer,
Mm-hmm.
because you're going to get way more out of it than the people who are benefiting from what you've learned, right? So,
Absolutely.
for sure. I know we've done 2 recordings now, you and me together. The first one was just when you were just clean, maybe a year and a little bit. I forget now exactly.
Yeah, very early on.
And a lot of us had hesitations then, wondering,
Mm-hmm.
well, is John going to actually be clear? So
The
many
first time
many
ever.
addicts make claims like, yeah, I'm free now, and then a few months later they're back into it. So it was with hesitancy but thankfulness that we saw a very clear change in your life. And people can go back and listen to those conversations. And then a year later we did another one, and you're rejoicing and helping others walk free from this kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah, it seemed to be a bit of a calling.
Yeah. And then now having this, like you said, this longing to be back in that environment, not only to help others but to continue to build yourself up.
Mm-hmm.
That's led to this new vision, this idea of
of starting a rehab. I remember when I was in rehab, I thought it was kind of interesting that this could be a way of life, right? That you could literally help and be there. Mind you, at the same time too, I didn't want to be there.
Right.
And then coming back, I was excited to come back, and it seemed to be a bit of a part of me, because I was like what Richard would call he would call me a unicorn. Richard from Joshua House.
Okay, he was the leader there.
He's he would say that you're the kind of guy that nobody ever, or everyone hears but nobody ever sees, right?
Right.
It is possible to become sober, but nobody ever actually sees.
You were saying that his success rate is actually really low. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And mind you, I'm hoping that's not going to be our case at all. But at the same time too, it does drive me to want to do that, to want to provide that. It seems like I'm doing that anyway. I'm doing that always.
If you don't mind, maybe just kind of describe what it was like there, because I remember I was here with your brother one day, and you had been there for a few weeks, and you called just like miserable. You were hating it. You wanted to be back with your family, and you just wanted to leave that place. You had already felt like you had some experience with God, and it turns out that it was a genuine experience. But there was still that desire to I got to be out of this place. Mm-hmm. How do you explain that battle where somebody's maybe an addict, they're there trying to get help, but they hate being there because they want to be free to do their things?
Well, yeah, it's a very much it's putting things into practice, and I was like that where, I was fortunate enough to be saved, because of my despair and because the position I was in. I was saved shortly after arriving.
Yeah.
But it was within the first few days.
God was obviously doing something outside of the
he had
rehab center.
Broken my spirit pretty hard, and I'd never imagined ever being there, and I had no idea how to get out of there. And so that was the despair and the godly sorrow. And so I got saved, and I really did want to go home because I really missed my family. I was excited about what had happened, and ready to kind of get back to normal, what I thought was normal, right? And so I was still very early on in understanding what God had planned for me and what He had in store. My original vision was I was going to go there and fake getting sober, and I was going to go home. That turned into, now I was actually sober, and now I really wanted to go home. And then that came to, now you got to stay longer, right? I was, the first 2 weeks, I literally thought I'd been there for 40 days, it seemed like.
Felt forever.
And I called home, and literally my brother-in-law, George, said, "You've been there for 2 weeks." And it literally felt longer than that. So my actual sobriety felt longer than what it was. And so at that point, I really still wanted to go home. And I thought I was ready to go home, and I had qualified, and just a big desire to continue life. Right?
And to go back and tell everybody what God had done for you.
Well, because I never really thought that I was going to be sober. I really never thought I was going to be sober, and I was excited to live life soberly. And now I'd had this little bit of information on how to live, right? I had started to read the Bible and really understood what it was like, what it was supposed to be like to be a dad and to be a husband and to be a member of society, really, and all these things that I was learning. And so I was just really on a push to go home and to share with everyone.
Yeah.
Right. But the reality was I was still very premature, and I do believe that I should have even stayed longer.
Well, that was going to be my next question is, we know, you and I know, that God delivered you through the gospel. You understood finally what Christ had done, and that instantly delivered you to some degree, where you were free. You knew you were never going to go back to that kind of drug abuse again, right? But at the same time, now you're saying that you really appreciated the time at the rehab. We don't think it was the rehab that actually freed you.
No, absolutely not.
But what did the rehab do then that you feel like, I probably should have actually stayed longer?
Yeah. Well, community, absolutely. There's community in a sense of separation, really, from everything that you knew before, is what really it provided for me. Now looking back, in the moment, I didn't want that. I didn't like that, right? I wasn't used to that, right? It's kind of like learning how to walk, right? You'll fall a lot and you'll stumble, and it's not really what you want to do, but it's something that's necessary, right? And that's what, looking back now, it was able to give me those things, the time away, the loneliness that I needed, in a sense, the time to pray, the time without the cell phone was amazing. That was one of the best things, and if I could,
probably one of the hardest things too.
Oh, it was ridiculously tough, but it was such a blessing to have things happen in the world and not know about them.
Well, that'd be challenging for any of us, not even if we're separate from our family.
Yeah,
or going
it is something absolutely to get used to, but if you're doing it all alone, it can be very scary. But I wasn't doing it alone. I was getting introduced to Christ, right? I was getting introduced to the possibilities of Christ and what He could do, and not having that outside communication only helped that grow, that. So that was some of the good things about it. But
structure, routine.
Yeah, very much that.
Establishing some discipline, that kind of thing.
Yeah, just really doing a regular routine. I mean, I cleaned the bathrooms for the first time in all of my marriage, really, and that seemed to be my chore there. So it was a huge humbling aspect of it all, right? To have to always clean the bathrooms, but just getting to a regular schedule where day in, day out, Christ is presented, Christ is researched, Christ is talked about, Christ is there. Those are some of the things that I miss the most. Is basically waking up in the morning and your only duty is to really learn more about Christ and share.
You have your regular routine stuff like cleaning and making your bed and all that kind of stuff and doing certain jobs around the place, but it's all centered around you need to actually find a way that motivates you to stay free.
Yeah, and it's not so much that it's structured around that's what you need to do, but it gives you that opportunity to do that, right? I wouldn't say that everyone's experience is the same as mine in a rehab facility, right? Some people will watch TV or they'll play cards instead, right? I realized and I knew that I was I was there to at this point I'm realizing that I was there to get it done, right? There to do one thing and only do it one time.
And to get your family back.
Yeah, I wasn't going to have a second shot at this, right? Because this was already difficult, and I'd already cost so much with my family and relationships, and I really didn't think I was going to get this opportunity, and so I really couldn't do it a second time. And so I ended up reading a lot and really studying and really growing inside personally, right? So that's not everyone's experience, but it gives you the space and the opportunity to do that if that is your desire.
Yeah. Well, I remember we probably said this on the first conversation that we had, but I remember Tony for several years before had shared with me the frustration of, bailing you out or helping you with something, and then you saying, "Oh, I promise this time I'm free, I'm clear," and then you're right back at it. And then I just came to realize that you really had no control over your desires. Even you could want something, but how to do that what you want, you had no power. Like Romans chapter 7, right?
It was absolutely not within
me. And so, how do you get into the right frame of mind? How do you get ready for a rehab? Because a lot of guys are kind of forced into it and pushed there. And
well, that was kind of my story too, a little bit. It was to the point where the police were at my house, and Children's Aid was going to get involved, and it was getting really, really messy again. And and so my wife had basically said that if I didn't go to rehab, I was going to lose my family.
But part of you wanted to be free. Part of you thought, "There's no way I can be free."
I just wanted it to be over.
You wanted the problems gone.
Yeah, even at that moment, I can't say that I was ready to go to rehab. I would actually say that I was very not ready to go to rehab. It was kind of like, it's kind of like when you're, when you're forced into I guess when the police show up at the door, the options are you're going to go with them or you're going to go with them, right? So that was kind of the options that I had before me. And it happened really fast. I agreed on, forget what it was, Thursday night, and Friday morning I was on my way to the airport. Yeah. So it was a really quick decision, and even then I wasn't quite ready. So how to get ready for it, I don't know, other than just do it.
You need people that actually care about you and maybe show you a little bit of tough love.
And maybe just realize that you're not going to be ready for it, right?
Yeah,
maybe it's just something you need to do. But next thing you know, it was happened really fast, and all of a sudden I'm in rehab, and that's where it all started.
Yeah.
But
so maybe kind of talk a little bit about what's happened since then, all the needs that you and George and a few others that have been seeing, right? Like I know George Giesbrecht has been contacted constantly by people who, hey, my brother needs help, my sister needs help, my dad, or whatever, right? People.
Yeah, there's always a need, especially drugs and alcohol. And really anything, right? Because it come to my attention anyway that there's way more addictions than just your regular drugs or alcohol kind of thing. But it seemed to me it was a few weeks after I had gotten back, then there's one old man. He reached out to me about his son, and it was just a matter of encouragement, right? Just a matter of encouragement. And so I met with him, and I spent pretty well all Saturday with him, and I had a Billy Graham study Bible. And he actually has it still to this day. I gave it to him. But so he started going through that and really started encouraging him. And it was enjoyable for me. I really liked it. I really felt like I was kind of back in a rehab situation. And the man is still doing well today. He just needed some encouragement. He needed to see some
What
scripture.
was his addiction?
It was not so much an addiction as depression.
Okay.
He had issues with depression and really just had no way of getting any kind of healing for himself, right?
Yep.
And it was just a matter of really just going through some scripture and really showing him who Jesus is and who he is as well. And I don't even remember exactly what our conversation was like, but we did spend quite a few hours together, and that was the beginning of it. I really enjoyed it. We still keep in contact, and he's still appreciative, and so am I, of our relationship. And it just seemed like...
That got you hooked, eh?
Yeah, it was like, wow, I could actually be used for something decent, right?
There's a family that the Apostle Paul mentions, I think it's in Corinthians, where he says the household of Stephanus, I believe it is, they had addicted themselves to the ministry. Mm-hmm. So you can go from one addiction to the other.
Oh,
right?
absolutely, you can.
You can get so hooked on this feeling of seeing somebody liberated and freed that you're like, I've got to do that again.
Yeah, absolutely. And then it was, there's always that, you don't want to, throw yourself into a situation because you don't want to be a boastful kind of person. You don't want to be a self-righteous or whatever. But it seemed like after that, the calls just kept coming.
Yeah.
And I wasn't too shy of sharing my testimony, right, that I've had many struggles with meth and all sorts of different things, from various lust issues, right? Me and my wife were separated because of it and that sort of thing. And so it just seemed like experience is the best teacher, right? Men are oftentimes find themselves in the same situation that I found myself in, right?
Yep.
And like myself, I didn't know how to get out of it. I just knew how to get in deeper,
Yeah.
right? And so then oftentimes...
And how to kind of hopefully cover it up enough to where you can still function without being looked at kind of strangely, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was kind of an expert at that for the longest time. I was really good at living the double life to the point where it was functionable, where I could get away with it. And that was actually probably one of the things that hit me the hardest, was realizing that I had not gotten away with it.
Yeah.
I had finally not gotten away with it. I had always gotten myself out of it, but now I just could not do anything else.
How bad is the problem then now around here, do you think?
Well, it's never gotten better ever, and it's only getting worse.
Seems like, right? Since 2020,
absolutely.
2022, that era time frame, it seems like a lot more people are on the streets, a lot more drug
Yeah,
use.
it seems like I don't know if you could blame it on necessarily COVID, but that season, right? That season really took a toll on a lot of people, left them in despair for many different things, right? And so it seems like anymore, and it might be just my way of speaking, but I talk to almost everyone about drug addiction. And everyone knows somebody or has a story. They have a cousin, they have a sister, they have a daughter, they have a brother, they have a son. Everybody has someone in their life that's addicted. I was reading some of the Stats Canada, and the increase is like 200% over the last year, 400% over the last 4 years.
Man.
You know, you're looking at losing more people a year to just a fentanyl overdose than you are World War I. More Canadians die every year of fentanyl overdose than World War I. That is an insane amount, right?
Sure.
So it's not something that's going to go away. It's not something that's going to be solved. I remember one of the things you asked me last time was if I ever seem to get overwhelmed with the amount of work that's available. And I would say that no, but it becomes more and more real all the time.
Because you could literally spend the rest of your life and hardly make a dent
100%.
in the actual problem that's
100%,
there, right?
Yeah.
So your goal is not necessarily to solve the fentanyl crisis or the overdosing and things like that.
No.
It's more to help individuals.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I mean, I was reading the statistic, and it's from the ages of 16 to 39 is pretty well. It covers 78% of them are men. Covers the overdose in Canada. 16 to 39. I was 39 years old when I got sober. I should have died. Statistically speaking, I should have died. And I know that since I've been sober, I've been able to help quite a few people with various addictions, helping them get to rehab, that sort of thing. And I just imagine if I could help 5 more men before I die, then I could help potentially 500 men before I die.
That's right.
Right? And so it's not a matter of being able to conquer thousands, but it's a matter of being able to help even a few really, really good ones and inspiring them to do the exact same thing that I'm doing, right?
Yep.
To maybe one day open up a rehab of their own. I mean, we're losing, thousands of men a year. Why couldn't we take a few of those and put them into a situation where now they're helping other people, right?
Yep.
And it all starts with the experience, right? Like, I know there's many men in the area that are would be ready and willing to help, but they don't necessarily have the experience that I have. They've spent years doing the right thing, and I did the years doing the wrong thing. Right, and so that's where I've gotten my experience from. And so I just think that if I didn't do this, it would be foolish. Right, because the opportunity is there, the need is there, and instead of helping on a small scale, then I think I can help on a larger scale.
Yeah. The majority of people who are contacting you, are they from our Mennonite background and heritage?
The majority of people are Mennonite. Yeah, absolutely. And even within the Mennonite community, there would be, it would never be a dull moment at the rehab.
No, that's
right. There would never be a dull moment. It would never be empty. There's always a wait list.
Well, I know when we did that Joshua House presentation over at Jake Fehr's shop, and then we recorded it and put it on here, like, first of all, 250 plus people showed up and packed that building out. A lot of them, like, old colony type of people. And some just, whatever. Everybody's interested because they all know somebody who's hooked.
Yeah.
And they're thinking, how do I get free? But and the video got 3,000 or 4,000 views too, right? So it's pretty exciting to see that there's an interest in it.
Yeah, and I think that the interest is because of the need, right? There's such a desperate need anymore for that. It was actually at that that same evening that at the Jake Fehr's is where I met a good friend of mine, and we still communicate all the time. And same thing, had an addiction, just didn't know how to get delivered, how to remove it from himself. Wasn't necessarily in a position of going to a rehab, and so I took him on personally, and we've been going through a step study and getting together and really just introducing him to who Jesus is and the possibilities of life in Christ, and getting him to better understand salvation.
Yeah.
And to this day, I think he's just over 3 months sober.
I see.
Right. And
is that kind of your first focus? I don't know what the rehab center, Joshua House, and we don't need to necessarily focus on that, the 12 steps and all that kind of stuff. But your focus would be getting them to simply see salvation.
Jesus, yeah.
You have to understand that you're hopeless without him.
Yeah, absolutely. Like one of the main tools that is used in often like NA or AA or Joshua's or any type of rehab is the 12 steps, right?
Yeah.
And it's all based on the Beatitudes of Christ, right? His Sermon on the Mount. And absolutely, that's one of the first steps, is to realize that you are poor in spirit, right? If you're not, if you don't understand yourself to be broken or to be poor, how can you be helped, right? If the cancer patient doesn't believe he has cancer, I mean, you're really not going to be able to help him a whole lot, right? He won't even show up to the appointment, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
And so that is the first step. But that would be one of our focuses, the 12 steps and that sort of thing. But I believe that simply with the Bible, you could really almost cure anybody.
Well, to me, a lot of times 12-step type programs, they start feeling more like psychology and self-help rather than the gospel. But if you take those steps and say, hey, look, recognize who you are, see that you have a problem, those are obvious things. Those are things that you need to do to present the gospel. That's like bringing the law in, showing them, hey, you're a failure.
Yeah.
I already know that. Yeah, but according to God, you're a failure. You
Yeah.
know, you've failed him, and here's what Christ has done, right? And so seeing your identity in Christ, knowing that through him you are made righteous, you are made holy, you've been made new, a new creature. To me, that's the most powerful thing about the gospel is, yes, your sins are forgiven and you're right with God. Not only that, he's made you a new creature. You can now walk according to a new identity and a new purpose, right?
And even that can be like, to have that taught to someone over a period of time where now you have, you're completely free of distractions. Now you're out in the middle of nowhere. Beautiful thing is there's no cell phone service out there. So that'll be a really good thing. But now you have that opportunity to step by step understand and recognize where you need to be, right? Even like walking through something like that, like the Beatitudes, right? It can take you from a point of, being poor in spirit and understanding that that's a good thing, and using that to a blessing, to, in the end, verse 11, being persecuted for your faith, right? To have that boldness and that confidence, but it can bring you on a step by step to show you how to get to where you need to be, right? And recognizing each step or each phase as you go, kind of thing.
Well, the thing about the Beatitudes for me and the Sermon on the Mount in general is that it's kind of like Moses 2.0. Like you thought Moses was tough? Wait till you hear Jesus. Moses said, don't lust. Jesus says, or don't commit adultery. Jesus says, don't lust. Don't look with lust, right? And so it's more a matter of the heart. You read the Sermon on the Mount and you should feel pretty undone. You should feel pretty poor in spirit. Like, I got nothing. And so the goal isn't to have everybody liberated to be poor in spirit. The goal is to recognize you are poor in spirit and you can now be filled.
And that's a blessing,
You
right?
can have righteousness, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then also too, I think, at least from my experience and from others around me as well, when you take someone through, like the Beatitudes is not a Narcotics Anonymous kind of a go-to thing. It doesn't speak necessarily to drugs or to alcohol, but a system like that where you can introduce them to Christ and show them Christ in that light, or themselves before Christ, not only does it take care of now the meth addiction or the alcohol addiction, but it also takes care of your lust and your swearing and your pride and all these other things that maybe necessarily weren't at the forefront of your addiction, but they're all things that are inclusive in your addiction, right? Because normally when you drink, you end up becoming a little bit extra prideful, and you become a little bit louder, and a little bit angrier, all these sort of things,
habits,
right? And same thing with meth, right? With meth, there's a it's not just a matter of one thing. Now you've got a disregard for people's property, and now you have a disregard for your time. All these things are, if you just stopped doing meth and you still carried all these other things, it really wouldn't help you, right?
Right.
But, given something like that, now you can take care of all these little things that later on become tools to be able to use to not only walk in freedom, but continue to walk in freedom, right?
Right before the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says in Matthew 3:10, he says, "Now also the axe is laid unto the root of the trees. Therefore every tree which bringeth not forth good fruit is hewn down and cast into the fire." So to me, it's Jesus was trying to get to the very root of these things. So the need for dependencies and external, vices, things like that, whether it's something as extreme as drugs or alcohol, or if it's just a simple need for food and ice cream, or something where you have to constantly feed your flesh, you got to get at the root of all of that, right? And that's where you as a person, whether you're an addict or not an addict, you're completely undone before God. You are poor in spirit. You don't have hope, but Christ has come for each sinner, right? So to me, you got to get down to the root, and then that will take care of all the symptoms and the problems.
Absolutely.
You could deal with each problem individually, like, hey, now you got to deal with this problem, then this problem, then this problem. But if you teach them Christ, and that you yourself, the whole person, are lost and undone, and the only hope is to crucify you and to be raised again in Christ, then all the symptoms are also dealt with. Doesn't mean that people are automatically free from everything.
No, we're not perfect
but
at all.
We have been freed from all temptation and sin. We just need to walk according to the new creature, right?
Yeah, the new creature, right? The new creation, right? The completely new man, right?
That's right.
Something totally different than before.
So how do you see this whole thing happening? Like it's quite a large undertaking. First of all, you need to buy a property. You need to set up structures and buildings. Then you need to put programs in place. You probably need to get some accreditation and training and,
Some of those things, yeah.
That's a lot.
Some of those things, yeah. So it is a huge undertaking. I'll be the first to admit that. I see it as God's project, not mine, because I don't think I could do it. But it seems like God has put it on my heart. So first off, there has to be a location, and it's not the first location I looked at. It's not the first idea that's been presented to me. I was given a property, or given the permission to a property just outside of New Sarum. And a friend of mine said, if you wanted to use this property, it was actually right after that Joshua House night. Yeah. He said, if you wanted to use this property,
we talked about
go ahead and do it, and then you can just build it and that sort of thing. And so I looked into building the necessary size of buildings and everything, and it was going to be quite expensive. Even with a free piece of land, it was still going to be right around the $2.5 million mark.
Wow.
And so we were talking about it, and we were extremely ambitious, and we just thought to ourselves, it's really not a big amount of money for a Christian.
If you have thousands of people
right?
gathered together.
Christians for a good purpose, good thing. But in the reality is I did get a little bit of cold feet because of that project. It wasn't really something that the township really wanted, or that the community wanted, or the municipality wanted, to take agricultural land and turn it into a rehab. And so, and also too, the amount of money, I was thinking to spend $2.5 million of other people's money and not have helped a single person yet. That seems a little bit it's a little ridiculous, right? And so I continued to search, and so I was looking into schools, and it didn't seem like I could find the right one. And so I was looking into camps. That was my next step. I was inspired by the men's encounter. Yeah. Every time I go there, it reminds me of Joshua so much. The community of men and the prayer and the fellowship.
Everybody's open and talking.
And then
freely.
You've got your cabins where you got 3 or 4 guys sleeping in, right? It's a really tight knit kind of thing. And so I was considering that, but it was obviously not for sale. And so I ended up looking online, and I found a place up north. And it's when I saw it, I thought it could be, and I actually went to go see it, and now it seems like it will be the place to go.
Okay. How far north?
It's way up there. It's beautifully up there. It's 18.5 hours from here.
Of driving.
Yeah.
And that's the only way to get there is driving?
No, they have Thunder Bay. It's 2.5 hours north of Thunder Bay, and so you can fly to Thunder Bay, and then you can drive up the rest of the way. They do have a small airport locally for smaller planes. And so futuristically, that's kind of the idea, is that we're going to be able to fly people in.
You had somebody that has a small plane or something.
Yeah, because the reality is I've sent half a dozen, if not almost a dozen people to Joshua's, and
They all fly.
they all
there.
fly,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So it's not impossible, and if you don't want to, then you don't have to, right?
That's right.
You can drive, and I made the drive, and it was I went up with a friend of mine, and it's quite the long drive.
Yeah.
Twice, 3 times I felt like maybe we should just turn around. This is too
This
far.
is too far away.
But the reality is, when you got there, it felt absolutely homey. It felt like it would be a perfect spot for it. So
well, there's some things about being separated like that actually are superior. And you mentioned before, not having cell service is actually a plus. That's
it's a
something
huge
that
bonus,
you need,
yeah.
right? And then also the temptation for people that are in rehab is obviously they're going to be like, I'm just got to get out of here. I got to get out of here. Once you're up 18 hours north, you're like, okay, where are you going to go?
Well, exactly.
And then
right?
that takes a lot of those options away.
Yeah, and it's not like you're forced to get better, but at the same time too, you have every opportunity.
You need
to
some
get
incentive
better, right?
to.
In reality is we've the property is actually really, really beautiful because the backyard is a 10,000 acre lake.
Wow.
And so it's for a man to go somewhere, like it's a man's kind of place, right? It's right now it's a hunting and fishing camp. They've got a ton of water and a ton of crown land around
Wildlife,
it,
yeah.
and so like for a man, it's just going to be a perfect place to go. It's set up quite wildlifey, and so then I just figure a place like that, even if you're going through some things, even if you're getting frustrated, even if you're getting upset or that sort of thing, feel free to take a walk. Feel free to go and get in tune with yourself and come back to that sort of thing, right? Give you the opportunity away from all the distractions. And
yeah. What kind of structures are on the property now?
They have they have a main house. That's where me and my family would probably be living, and it's about 4,000 square feet. It's got a beautiful 3-tier deck on it overlooking the lake. It's really set up nicely. It's also got the basement is also available for living as well. It's got 4 massive bedrooms down there, and then aside from that, it has 12 cabins.
Wow.
With a total of 8,600 square feet. It's got 77 single beds now that are able to.
So it's like a full camp.
It's a fully functioning camp.
Okay.
Right. So it's not a matter of spending a bunch of money and then trying to figure out how you're going to get books and bedding. And this place is literally like turnkey kind of thing. We could potentially start before spring. If the money came in fast enough, we could potentially start before spring. So it's all set up and ready to go as far as being able to use.
You're not looking at $2.5 million.
No, not at all. It's actually half of that.
Okay.
It's just over half of that. It's 1.3.
I see.
And so it still seems like a lot of money.
But if you
But at the
compare it
same
to a
time-
house here in town being $900,000 or $1 million,
It's really not that bad. And the idea is that it'll be a separate corporation. Just recently, like it is starting from ground zero, right? I just opened up a bank account and got a name, right? It's Born Again Ministries.
okay.
And so that's our name. And so the next step would be to incorporate it so it'll be a separate entity all by itself so it can continue to exist regardless of me. I just want to kind of be the founder. I don't necessarily have to be everything about it, but at the same time too ready to give the rest of my time for it kind of thing. So it would be a separate thing from me.
So right now your major focus is trying to get that building somehow.
To be able to buy the property.
Buy the property.
Yeah, to buy the property. Ideally, outright would be amazing, right? To just own it and not have to worry about any debt. But at the same time, too, it's all going to be crowdfunded, so it all depends on that.
And then the whole property would go into the name of the business or the corporation.
Yeah, the ministry itself. Yeah. I've looked into getting a charity status, and that's quite costly.
It's a procedure. Eh?
Yeah, it's quite costly. Mind you, if that's what's needed, that would be the step that we would go. I'm trying not to because spending other people's money, you want to be as conservative as possible, right? And so,
what other options are there if it's not considered a ministry or a charity organization?
well, there's 3 main ones. There's the charity, and then there's the not-for-profit, and then there's the corporation. And so, whenever you have a charity, then you're limited on, as far as I understand, and if someone is more educated in this, they feel free to correct me. But what I understand for a charity is you need to spend all your money every year. It's not something where you can now grow or have a savings or kind of invest or that sort of thing, right? And then a not-for-profit is fine and dandy, but it's split between. No, sorry, it's not split between. It's as far as the founder cannot be employed by the ministry itself, right? That was the downside to that. And then a corporation is basically where you now run it as a business, and now you have opportunity to invest and to grow and to continue on the ministry.
Yeah.
That's
Some of the benefits of the charity thing would be that it's
the tax write-offs,
and people could give as a way to lower their own tax for
yeah,
business reasons.
And that would be, I mean, I wouldn't be opposed to it, but at the same time too, I would like, if we wouldn't need to, I would say I would rather not, right?
So again, this vision of getting the buildings doesn't seem impossible, but then you not only need to have the crowdfunding to supply the property and the building, but then you also need some way for you guys to stay afloat and stay alive, right? So
yeah.
Would you be charging people to come to the rehab?
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it would be the number that I've kind of been working with is about $2,000 a month for anyone to stay there, and that would pretty well include their entire stay, food, meals, lodging, the whole works,
all the training,
programs,
teaching,
all that kind of stuff, everything that's involved with it. For me personally, I think that's reasonable. Our rent is actually higher than that here a month, right? So I think it's
But
it's
then
reasonable.
some people who are, like, say, if you were in that situation now, your wife not only needs to continue to pay her rent, but she also needs to pay $2,000 on top. So it's always crowdfunded, and people contribute and help out.
Yeah,
right?
And there is I'm not 100% familiar with it, but I know that there is government funding as well.
That's
and so
Joshua House uses some of that, right?
Yeah,
like
that's usually around the $1,100 range. And so with that, then that would only leave the person or the family member of the church that would be involved to cover then $900 a month. And I think that would be very reasonable to be able to do.
For sure.
And the reason I chose the 2,000 is because for the amount of guys that I want to have, anywhere from 30 to 50, with obviously big dreams of possibly one day 500 or something crazy like that, right? But 30 to 50 is something where you can run it, where you're not going to be struggling for finances. The idea is to get it crowdfunded to start, but not to continuously have to have it crowdfunded in the future, right? Where the program would self-sustain itself, so that the guys that are coming in would basically, in a sense, be paying for the guys that are coming up ahead of them, right? So it would be in a spot where you're not always struggling.
Some of these ideas you probably
finances.
Got from Joshua House too, right? The way that they function.
Yeah, there's. I love the program there. I would do it a lot of the same way, but I would like to. I would like to struggle a little bit less with certain things, like being able to feed the guys, having a better nutrition program, and that sort of thing. Food is incredibly important when you're trying to get better. Those sort of things that I would try to implement differently, and obviously funds are always needed for that sort of thing, right?
Yeah. And you would need more staff than probably just your family.
Absolutely, yeah.
Cleaning, and also maybe monitoring the men, and teaching.
Well, there's a lot of that actually does happen with the guys that are present.
They do a lot of the cleaning.
Absolutely.
And stuff.
Well, they do all of their own cleaning,
right?
And they do most of their own cooking. There would always be. I plan on having a staff, like a licensed chef or someone who's really good in the kitchen, kind of thing. But for the most part, the men would be doing their own work, as far as like their own cleaning, their own cooking, all these sort of things, right? It's just that getting yourself back into that habit of it. And so the staff isn't that
not your major concern, right?
No, it's not that bad that way. And then even for your leaders and the people that you have to teach these guys and maintain these guys are all people that have either come through the program themselves or have been to a different rehab sort of situation.
Okay.
And so for the most part, it actually ends up almost running like a family where, the father takes care of the children and the children take care of the fathers, right? It's a very...
I visited a rehab center in Mexico when I was there, and it's right in the community, right? Like the Cuauhtemoc is there, and then the rehab is right there, but they pretty much get locked in like a prison, so they can't leave either.
Yeah.
So it's kind of that similar situation. Their cell phones get taken and all that kind of stuff. And then they have local ministers and teachers come in regularly to do a lot of the instructing and teaching. So that would be one advantage to having it close by, right? Where a lot of the people that are helping could actually be volunteers. Whereas if it's 18 hours away, you pretty much have to have somebody on staff that's...
Yeah, well, and a lot of those things I would want to do as well. Taking advantage, obviously, of the hunting and fishing, scenario, right? And having teachers come in from the outside and that sort of thing, right? But it wouldn't be that type of a scenario where it would be like the jail kind of scenario, with the concrete walls all the way around, or that sort of thing, right? And but you would be amazed at some of the talent that comes through rehab. Like,
Oh, a lot of
absolutely
these
amazed.
people are very talented
Like,
people.
super talented.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
You know, not when they're beside themselves, but when they're of a right mind, when they're you know, learning for themselves
Absolutely.
and growing through themselves, right? You can find some really talented people coming
Yeah.
through the rehab.
That's cool. So how about accreditation, or what would you call it? Like some kind of qualification that you are fit to. I mean, you got the experience.
Yeah.
You know what it's like to be hooked on meth and several other things, but what gives you the right, so to speak, the authority to say, I know how to help these people?
Well, apart from Christ, I have no authority at all. But I would say I personally, I've volunteered at CR for the last 2 years. I've done
What's CR?
CR, Celebrate Recovery.
Okay.
It's like a Christian AA, NA kind of thing. So I've been doing that, as well as helping other guys go through the 12-step study and that sort of thing. And it's not so much about me having the authority myself, but altogether the team and what it's going to be producing itself, because it wouldn't be just me running it all by myself.
Right.
It would never be just me, but it would be everyone coming through there. So I guess my main qualification would be my experience and my drive for that. And
But you'd have the system, the whole 12 steps, so you're not just willy-nilly hoping that people find the truth. There would be a certain step. Now we're going to talk about this.
Absolutely. Well, there's a few like the 12 step is obviously going to be prevalent there. And then planning on introducing the heart of addiction. It's a biblical understanding of addiction.
Mm-hmm.
That is also going to be a study that I'm planning on introducing. I won't be teaching that one myself. I don't have enough experience with that, but I do have a fellow that's experienced in that as well, who's willing to come on board.
Okay.
Who's going to be doing that one.
There's even possibility for some of those kinds of things, the teaching to be done online or through a video of some sort, right? Where we're going to be talking about it in person. We're going to be dealing with it in person. You're going to be stepping away from all the potential problems in your life, all the temptations and whatever else. You're here, you're separate, and now we're going to focus on this thing. Some of the teaching might be done through video, but we're going to talk about it afterward. And
Joshua's did the same thing too,
Okay.
right? They always had a video series every afternoon, right? And so you go through the Conquer series or Boundaries or these different things, right? And then have a discussion afterwards and that sort of thing. So yeah, we would be doing that as well, probably, more than likely.
Would you be focusing primarily on narcotics?
No, actually anything. Not necessarily narcotics or alcohol. Anything from depression to even suicide. Pretty well anything that...
Someone who's in dire straits, someone who doesn't know how to move forward in life.
Yeah, basically if you need to get away from where you are and you need help and you're lost, then we want to help you be found or to be born again, pretty much, right? Because I do believe that with Christ at the beginning of the program, or the center of the program, there is really nothing that you can't tackle, nothing that you can't handle. Something that I don't think that we'll have, or that I've heard is not a very successful thing, is gambling. Gambling, it seems to be one thing that really...
like addiction to gambling.
Yeah, it seems to take most rehabs for a loop.
Really?
So I wouldn't, claim that. I've never actually dealt with anybody with a gambling addiction,
I see.
right? But other than...
I called several addiction centers and rehab centers over the last few months trying to help somebody that had, I think, a sex addiction, right? Some online problem where it was more than just, lust every now and then. It was taking over his life and ruining him. And a lot of the places that I called, they said, we don't deal with that. That's out of our realm. You almost need a sex addiction expert or something along those lines, right? Obviously, you and I believe that if Christ comes in and they're genuinely understanding of the gospel and they're free and liberated in their soul, that anybody can be free.
Yeah, right? Absolutely. And then there again, I would probably be able to just speak to from my own experience. One of the things I never had planned on being able to, I guess, remove was my sexual addiction. I could consider myself a sex addict as well, but after recognizing Christ and realizing who Christ was, I was no longer a sex addict, right? I definitely had conviction, and I knew that I could no longer do that, right? And so I think in the same way. When you introduce someone to Christ and when they really understand who Christ is, I think that very much pretty well not eliminates the temptation, but it eliminates the identity of it, right?
Yeah.
You start to work on yourself, and you start to progress in a way that maybe wasn't even possible before, right?
Right.
Because I do think that when you see Christ in his true light, you can no longer continue.
And see yourself in light of what he says of us, right? To me, that's been always one of my focuses in the ministry, is that if you're constantly telling people, this is a bad thing, that's a bad thing, you need to stop doing this, you need to start doing that, bad, bad, good, good, trying to always paint very clear lines and all that kind of stuff, and then afterward maybe introduce Christ a little bit, you might help them walk free from certain things. But for me, the focus has always been lift up Christ, talk about his goodness and his grace and how complete his work for us is, and our participation in his death and his burial and his resurrection, that you are a new creature, you have been freed from your sins. The door of the prison is open. The chains are broken off. You can now currently walk free. Then you don't have to necessarily deal with a bunch of individual sins. Just get people so fixated and focused on Christ and his work that the things, all of a sudden, they start falling off, right?
Mm-hmm.
You don't necessarily need targeted help for every individual thing.
Yeah, lay a solid foundation, and then even after that, if they fall on the foundation, right?
Yeah.
And if the foundation is Christ,
Yeah.
they always have somewhere to go up from, right?
And that's, to me, the difference between psychology and Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Psychology is helping the individual focus on flaws in his character or problems in his nature or his heritage or his upbringing or whatever it might be, and identifying them and then targeting them and trying to not deal with them anymore. Whereas the Christian gospel message is one of complete, like, the old man is done away.
Mm-hmm.
Whoever you used to be, I don't care your addictions, I don't care your habits, I don't care who you came from, what your parents were like. Those things have all been done away with. You were crucified to the cross with Christ. You were buried with him, and you were raised to new life. What does that not include?
Yeah, the ultimate grace.
Which part of you was not involved in that? All of you. Yeah. The whole old man was done away with. Now we should also put on all these, bowels of mercies and kindness and all those things that need to be added. But recognizing the old man was done away with, and even the word recognizing, the word reckon is used in Romans chapter 6 several times, right? Reckon ye yourselves to be dead indeed. That's not try to get dead indeed to sin. That's recognize that you are dead to sin and now walk as those that are alive from the dead, right? So the gospel is much more,
that grace. It's like this is the way
it's more than a psychology program.
Yeah. Yeah, and even yourself too, when you try to go through those moments where it might not become it might not feel that way, but the reality is it is that way.
Yeah,
right?
We walk not by sight.
It is, yeah.
We don't walk by feelings. We walk by faith.
And then because of that, you're almost limitless, right? You're pretty well limitless, right? If there's nothing bound to you anymore, nothing that's tying you anymore, no shame or guilt, right? Now you can lead with confidence and boldness.
So that some people might again be saying, well, then why bother with the rehab? Just tell them the gospel. And that's true. Absolutely. But when somebody's mind is so completely overtaken by narcotics or alcohol or something where they can't function anymore, they have all the desire to do it at times, but how to do that they don't find, then to separate them from their substance that's constantly distracting or numbing their mind, and then they can finally let down those guards and then present the gospel, hopefully, right? So,
yeah, I mean, someone soberly minded and at a perfect moment where they want to hear the gospel and that sort of thing. Absolutely, I think that the gospel will save anybody and everything, right? Absolutely. But like most addicts, we're usually stuck in our own world. We're doing our own thing where we have our own habits, we have our own patterns that we like to do, we have our own little tricks up our sleeves, right? We talk to certain people because they treat us a certain way and we don't, you know what I mean? So we're always kind of guiding our addiction, through as we're going, right? And so the addict needs that time away where it's absolutely completely different. And so basically to get a reset, to get a reality check, to get a realization of where they are in life, right? Because like even in my own addiction, I spent many times in the bottom of a dumpster and was not uncomfortable at all. I mean, I should have been, but the reality is it was suiting what I had set for myself, right? And at the same time too, I could show up let's say at a family gathering and I didn't feel out of place there, right? Because it was somehow I'd set it up so it worked for me, right? The addict does that, right? The addict always sets it up so it works
and
for them.
and the drugs will, I don't know what they do, if they numb certain parts of the brain or just take over certain, the chemicals are released to where you don't even feel shame or guilt towards things that any logical person would be like embarrassed of, right?
Yeah, and then normally if you do, that would just lead you to then do more drugs or drink more or whatever it is, kind of hide the shame, right? So it doesn't. The addict on their own, unfortunately, is not likely to come to a place of okay, I'm just going to listen to what the gospel has to say, and that's just going to be the best answer possible.
Well,
right?
even for myself, I wouldn't have considered myself an addict. Ultimately, when you realize that you can't overcome a certain sin, then you are an addict to one degree or another, right? So here I was, a young Christian, quote unquote, Mennonite boy, doing things the right way, getting baptized and getting married and doing all the good stuff, and yet in my mind saying, I don't want to do this sin anymore. My camera's off again. And then doing it anyway. Yeah, here I was, a young Mennonite boy, young man now, and heard the gospel plenty of times. A bunch of friends had gotten saved and tried to share with me, and I wanted nothing to do with it. It wasn't until I felt the weight and responsibility and the sobriety of knowing that I'm responsible for another human soul, my little daughter, then it shook me up to where, like, I need to hear something. I need to know what to do. How do I believe? What do I do? What do I need to believe? And so everybody needs something to shake them up. Yeah. And so I can see someone who's trying to stay afloat and just do their drugs or alcohol or whatever other problem they have, and trying to maintain a lifestyle that's failing them, and they're never quite at the end. A preacher once said to me that he had been given the advice that when people come to you with help, don't be another knot in their rope. Be a little bit of grease. So he said you got to get them to the bottom. Until they are at the very bottom, they won't see their need to look up and need help, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And so that would be what a rehab center could do for people, is get them to wake up, like, hey, you're at the very bottom. This is the last step before prison or death or who knows what. Right?
Absolutely, right? When you're so far away from everyone and there's no contact, but at the same time too, it's not just a matter of that, right? So like, it's a great thing to get to that point, but then what, right? Like I've said it oftentimes, what I would like to be able to give to people or give to them is what a rehab could give them, right? That's the ultimate objective, right? To give them that experience or that amount of knowledge or that comfort or that security, right? But the reality is, like, for a regular person to one-on-one counsel someone or one-on-one communicate with someone, it would take years to be able to get the hours in that you can get in at a rehab, right? Because now you can actually, not only are you broken, but now you're curious, and now you're gonna work. And
you have nothing else to do.
Exactly, right?
It's time to get free.
You're from day in, day out, right? From 7 o'clock in the morning till 4:30. You're teaching and you're learning about God, that sort of thing.
The difficult part I can see is you're also going to have a lot of failure. So people will send someone up there and they come home still addicted, and they'll say, John Fehr's rehab center doesn't even work. It's useless. It's pointless. Yeah. Apart from the work of God in someone's life, you're not going to be able to free everybody.
Yeah, it will.
Sure.
Yeah, it will be. Absolutely.
You're hoping to bring
useless.
The truth and the Spirit of God into their life to where God can do a work in them, right?
Yeah.
And so some people will get it. God will do the work in some people. Some people are refusing it. Their hearts are hard and not prepared, and there's nothing. You can't save everybody, right? You can't get to everybody.
Yeah, like even, and that's absolutely it. Like apart from the work of God, there's going to be no success there at all. We'll be able to love on each other. We'll be able to feed these guys and give them a place to stay, right? But apart from the work of God, it'll be just that, right? It'll be just a place to stay and that sort of thing, right? So ultimately, it absolutely does rely on God. But that's the beauty in it, right? Even though I will have failures and I will have stresses and I will have things where, some people will not be receptive, right? The work of God is still everything.
But I think it's important for people to realize that, hey, this is not a guarantee. This is an opportunity to hopefully get somebody to understand and know the truth, and then be set free, because it's ultimately the truth that sets people free.
Absolutely.
So the whole crowdfunding idea, what's the goal there, and how does that work?
So basically just I've got a GoFundMe started. I'm going to be accepting e-transfers, and I've also did a Give Send Go.
Everything's going directly into that
into that one
account?
To that one account, and then with the hopes of being able to raise enough funds to be able to actually buy the property.
Is that account already in the business name?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's not something that you could, access constantly and,
No.
be shifting funds around.
No.
It's going to be strictly for that purpose.
Yeah, for that purpose, yeah.
And I guess you've probably got a certain number in mind that you're kind of hoping
Yeah,
the whole property being paid for would be awesome.
Ideally the 1.3, and then that way, the people that own it right now, their names are John and Patty. I met them. They're wonderful people, and
They know your vision.
Yeah, they know the vision, and they're willing to support it as well as helping for themselves and providing or being able to help to turn the property into that sort of thing. And so ideally, I'd like to be able to give them what they're asking, and I think it's well worth it. So if the whole property got paid, that would be amazing. But as far as, because it is in the tourist industry that you'd be purchasing the property for, there needs to be a 50% down to be able to actually buy the property.
So the minimum is like 600 and some odd thousand.
Yeah, 650 to be able to start, right?
Yeah, nice.
And I envision it happening really, really fast, right? I have a lot of faith in God and in God's people, right? But at the same time too, if it doesn't necessarily happen quick, it doesn't mean that I'll be giving up. I think it'll just be continuous until it happens.
You're praying for that. Are you doing any other things, fundraisers or?
I'm going to be doing some presentations at churches. I still haven't quite finalized my presentation yet. I'm planning on doing one at the Church of Springfield actually this weekend.
Okay.
So that'll be something else that I'm planning on doing. And if need be, some other events.
Yeah, I was thinking, like, I know
such.
George Schmidt was just here a couple times, but something like that, getting people together under the name of the rehab and just bringing attention to this idea, doing short presentations and.
Yeah, and I imagine, like, even there was always going to be more questions to be asked and all that sort of thing, right? So altogether, it'll have to be a bit of an awareness and letting people know and stuff like that, and so.
Yeah.
Yeah, the biggest thing would be, obviously the money is a big thing to being able to purchase the property, but I would say that one of the biggest things I'm concerned about is prayer support, and also just letting the word, go out, kind of thing, right? That's my biggest concern. I think that God will provide the funding if it's in His desire, if it's in His will.
Do you know if there's a lot of legal or political hoops to kind of jump through? And
there is, if you start a charity or not for profit right away, then you've got a lot of people or a lot of I guess bureaucracy that has a lot of say in all that.
But if it's a business, a corporation, as a camp,
it's a completely
people can come
separate
and go.
thing. Yeah, it's a completely on your own what you want to do with it kind of thing. Something else to be noted too as well that made this property really ideal is the property itself is 10 acres, so that's a good size. That's like 4 or 5 times the size of what we were going to do here, and but it's a non-restricted municipality, and so basically what that means is all the crown land that's attached to it is all for, you can apply for land use change and then have the possibility of future buying it, right? Another part of the property is there's a provincial park that's about 7 kilometers away. That is our only neighbor on the entire road itself, and so it's so perfect for expansion, right? Ideally, I say like 500 men. Out of all the properties I've seen, this place has that potential. I don't know if it would ever go that far, but it does have that potential, right?
Yeah. Well, we'll have to think about it in that respect, right, and see that it's a big vision. It's a large undertaking, but that there's some real potential there.
Yeah, I feel like there's with a need, and it's one of those things that I'll be doing it regardless, whether I do it in a rehab situation or if I'm doing it one-on-one with people, or helping someone reach a different rehab facility. It'll just be something I'm going to do anyway.
Yeah.
And so if I can manage to somehow pull this off with God's people and be able to provide a place that's now going to be a forever rehab kind of thing, where men can get to know Christ and just that would be amazing, right?
I guess one of the things I probably should ask, because it's coming to my mind, and I would imagine other people are going to consider this too, is let's say people give thousands of dollars, all of a sudden $200,000-$400,000 comes together, and it's not enough for you to really get started. What happens to the funds? Where does that?
They would stay there, and I would continue.
And you would try eventually to get something going.
I have thought about a complete belly up situation. Let's say it all just doesn't go, and I just can't get myself to move or whatever have you, whatever situation could arise, I would then take all that money and I would donate it to another rehab facility, right? If that was the vision, if that was the purpose of it.
But if this
it would have to
property,
go that way.
this thing falls apart, something else will come up. Your goal is to
My
start
goal is
something
to do this regardless.
within the next year or two,
Yeah.
if possible.
Yeah, before spring actually.
That's
Ideally, yeah. Ideally before spring. There's even just mentioning the idea. There's a client list already that's waiting
Yep.
to be able to start. So the reality is, if we started tomorrow, we'd have 5 people at the door right away. And so the need is there now, and so just as soon as possible would be ideal.
Okay.
But yeah, I don't plan on stopping with the idea, and I think it's going to happen. I've said it before, if God wants it to happen, it'll happen regardless if I'm there or not. And if he doesn't want to happen, it doesn't matter if I'm there or not, right? So all to the glory of God, it will happen.
Right on. Hopefully I'm not missing any big questions. Was there any other major things you were hoping to point out that you can think of now?
On the spot, no.
Okay. You'll have account names, or you can send me the links and stuff.
Yeah,
like
for
that.
the GoFundMe, and then also for the Give Send Go. We do also have a Facebook page, and we have an Instagram page. They're very early on.
Yeah.
But we do have that as well.
Okay.
So I'll give that a link as well.
Right
And
on.
then yeah, I guess just look forward to seeing me in the churches in the local area. I don't know how far and wide I'll go, but I guess until the need is met, and then I'll just be working.
Right on. Well, I appreciate it.